want to try this one again? Okay, well, because there's a place that's right below where you did yesterday that's not so sclerosed. Autoimmune illness is, I don't know what causes it, but it's an imbalance in the immune system.
It's really where the body is attacking itself. And why the body is attacking itself, they don't seem to know.
I decided to produce this documentary project after a doctor defined me as having an autoimmune disease. That's when I learned about autoimmune disease in general, when I tried to learn more about what autoimmune was, and I started to discover that what was happening to me was happening to women globally. So I took it upon myself to produce a documentary that would bring us together and unite us under one collective voice.
I'm Melissa. I have multiple sclerosis. I'm 45 years old. I have a beautiful baby and a wonderful husband, and I live in Port Washington, New York.
Hello, my name is Mitra Winborn. I'm 27 years old, just turned 27 years old. I enjoy writing poetry, writing short stories. I've been learning how to play the guitar. I was diagnosed with scleroderma in 1999 with pulmonary fibrosis, but also have a lot of underlying conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, menopause, acid reflux, and Raynaud's phenomenon.
My full name is Manya Lise Cheyenne Unger. I'm 73, was born in Brooklyn, raised partly in New York, the rest in Beverly Hills, California. Went to college and graduated from a California girls' college, Mills, and 2 weeks later I married a New Yorker. And within a few months I found myself an advocate for children. Because of dealing with health and education and general welfare and safety issues, I found myself being asked to represent the parental public, that ubiquitous person, on a variety of commissions and committees of the federal government and of the state government. And I've been doing it ever since.
My name is Elba Reyes. I'm a 51-year-old mother of 5 and a grandmother of 7. I was diagnosed with lupus 3 years ago.
I think I first started showing some of the symptoms, the sort of shaky quakiness, when I was about 37, going on 38.
When I was told that I had MS, nothing was explained to me. The only thing that was explained to me is that maybe I'll be in a wheelchair and maybe I won't, which is, was a reaction to my thing. I mean, I'm going to be in a wheelchair, and they just said, no, maybe you won't. Maybe, with the kind you have, maybe you won't. That is the only thing that I was told about MS. Everything that I found out about MS, I found out on my own.
The doctors didn't want me to know. The doctors thought I would be afraid of what was happening, and they didn't want me to read up on it, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't know that I have something and not read up on it. It wasn't until I went to a support group and they gave me pamphlets. They explained to me what was going on.
It never occurred to anybody to link any of this or to say that I was at base suffering from an incipient autoimmune problem or imbalance. Never.
I never even knew what that was. Autoimmune disease, what is it? No one ever told me that. No one ever told me that.
It was not until my elder son, at the age of 20, when I would have been about 44, was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And it was then that they were talking about trying to figure out whether there'd been a history of Crohn's in the family and what other diseases there might be. And it was the first time that anybody mentioned an autoimmune disease in relationship to his Crohn's. And in trying to discover whether there were any other diseases like Crohn's in the family, they took an extensive history of both Skip and myself, and indeed our parents. And that's when somebody said, well, you know, Graves is an autoimmune disease.
So the inception of this documentary project occurred when I was in grad school. For the first time, I was getting a Master's of Arts in Media Studies. This is about 10 years ago. And I had been sick for some time, just a lot of symptoms, weight loss, skin rashes, allergies, hair loss, pain, you name it, I had it. And I took a class called Video Autobiography. And it was around that time that I'd finally gotten to a rheumatologist who said to me finally that a lot of the symptoms that I had, as well as a lot of things that showed up in lab work and physical signs that he saw, were consistent with an autoimmune syndrome or disease. And so I started to produce a project that kind of followed me through the process of trying to understand what autoimmune was, what exactly I was dealing with, what the prognosis would be, how to explain that to people.
Most people never heard of autoimmune disease, never heard of scleroderma. It's difficult to explain to a lot of people that if they have a cold, I cannot come around them. Because with an autoimmune disease, basically your body's attacking itself. With regular people, I hate to say that, not like I'm irregular, but whenever there's a foreign object in the body, whenever they get a cold, it attacks that. But with autoimmune, it can't distinguish between the foreign object and what's normal in your body, so it attacks everything, and that's why I end up sick. So I had to take medication to suppress my immune system. So my immune system is shot. I have no immune system. So if I'm around someone sneezing, I know I'm going to end up in hospital with a flu, which is eventually going to turn to pneumonia, which is why I've been in hospital so many times with pneumonia. So I have to be on the ball to get my flu shot, to get my pneumonia shot, or I would be sick all the time.
This documentary initially started out as a method for raising awareness about autoimmune illness, and in particular the fact that it seems to strike women disproportionately. That was what I really hoped to accomplish.
I first realized something wrong back in high school. Back when I was a junior in high school, I started developing rashes and hives, and they wouldn't go away. I kept going to the doctor, and they told me that they would be gone within a few weeks, within a month, and 6 months went by, a year went by, and I continued to break out, and rashes all over my body. They started leaving scars till my skin was discolored, and then I started feeling dizzy all the time. I started getting chronic fatigue, but then it went away, and then when I went to college, it got worse. My joints would start swelling up.
I've always had pain somewhere because of something. And they could never tell me what it is, you know? And I'll be in pain, and they ask me, if you could measure your pain between 1 and 10, what is it? I say, a 10. They say to me, but a 10 is that you can't take it. I said, well, it's a 10. Because that's how it feels, it's a 10. Was it ever a 1 or 2 or 3? No. When I get relief, I'm at a 7. You know, all the time.
I had extreme fatigue. With relapse-remitting multiple sclerosis, the attack comes, it intensifies within 3 weeks, and then it takes a while for it to dissipate, sometimes up to a year. And during that time where it's dissipating, there are little pseudo exacerbations that happen. Like every day at 3 o'clock, I would feel like I had to lie down. I mean, it was like, no question, I have to lie down. I could not move. I could not pick up my body.
My fingers were swelling, and my joints were swelling, and the pain was incredible. So they started running tests, and they found out that I had some form of arthritis, you know. And from there, just everything kept happening.
There'd been a lot of stress and strain in the family, not the immediate family, but 2 of my girl cousins were in the process of dying. One was from multiple sclerosis, the other one was from breast cancer. And of course the whole family was agitated, and I guess in particular. So I didn't pay too much attention to the fact that I seemed to be, for somebody who was always phlegmatic and was accustomed to speaking in front of groups. I'd been a performer as a child and as a young adult. And I suddenly discovered that my voice was quaking, my hands were shaking. I seemed to be nervous, and I'd never been a nervous person. That was followed shortly thereafter by the fact that I began to feel as though I had sand in my right eye. I was constantly asking my husband and the children, can you see anything in my eye?
24/7, my feet are numb. I don't feel my feet. I mean, what do you mean by numb? Is that there's this kind of like feeling that my feet are asleep.
I had an ex-boyfriend, and when it finally hit me after my family did a little intervention with me, and they said, maybe you should get some help because you shouldn't always be sick like this. And I said to my ex-boyfriend, do I seem like there's always something wrong with me? And he looked at me and said, you don't know? I mean, you're always sick to your stomach. Every time you get out of the shower from the steam, you're covered in like hives. I'm always rubbing your head, or your neck hurts, or your back hurts, or your feet hurt. You're always exhausted. He's like, you're allergic to everything. You didn't know that that's not normal? And I remember thinking, well, I thought it was normal and that there was something wrong with me because I couldn't handle it.
Scleroderma is scarring or hardening of the skin. A lot of people get it on the outside of the skin, but it also can affect the inside organs as well. I have it in my lungs.
Let me tell you, I know now that I had lupus for a long time, because whenever I went into the sun, I would break out. And I didn't know why I would break out. They would give me hydrocortisone for it. But every time the summer came around, I'd break out. I got to the point that I hate the summer. I hate it. I will not go out in the summer. And I refuse to let the sun even look at me. I'll stay indoors because I get real sick in the summer.
One doctor explained to me, he told me to touch my lip. And he said that's what lungs are supposed to feel like. And he told me to touch the tip of my nose, where the gristle is. He said that's what your lungs feel like. So, that's pretty much.
I'd become very insomniacal. I also had become terribly energetic. My house never was as clean. The clothes were never as well washed or ironed. I hate ironing. But I would press things. I'd polish things. It drove Skip crazy because I would do this in the middle of the night since I couldn't sleep. And it reached the point where Skip noticed that I could not shut my eyes, literally.
Typical day. I wake up in the morning. I take my medication. I have about 5 or 6 bottles I have to take. One thing is difficult for me because in the morning, especially in the morning, my joints are really stiff and achy, and I have to cut some of my pills in half, so that's a bit of a struggle to do. Then I come and I do my exercise, and because I have shortness of breath, because of my lungs, sometimes that could be a little difficult to perform. Usually I have an oxygen tank.
When I go get a pedicure, and the Korean ladies, they don't speak English, and they make the water too hot, and and my legs jump, when they like cut my nails and stuff, and I like wiggle, and they go, oh, I'm sorry, and they go, oh, what did I do? And I can't. There's no word. There's no. Apparently in Asia they don't have multiple sclerosis, and there is no translation for this word. So I just tell them that my feet are sick, and they go, oh, but yeah, my feet are sick. I have pain in my hands. I have a dizziness. I can't turn around without getting dizzy, not even once. When I go down to the floor and come back up again, I'm dizzy.
Just performing small tasks, that has to do, you just don't know how important your joints are until they're swollen and achy. Just, doing normal things like walking to the store. I get out of breath walking to the corner to the store. I live up on the hill, so I have to walk up and down the hill just to get some eggs or something.
Brave was the name of a doctor who figured out that when your thyroid and your pituitary, which behave like bicycle pedals are out of sync, that it creates a, what did he call it? It was a swelling behind the eye, and an that was it, an exophthalmic goiter. That it was the same kind of thing that you'd get under your throat if it was just the thyroid being involved. But being Graves' disease, it had this growth, I guess, which pushed the eye forward. And what subsequently I learned was that what I thought was grit or sand or something scratching my eyes was actually the fact that my eyeballs were being pushed forward by this exophthalmic goiter. And it was causing the lid to pull back as the eyeball itself went forward. And what I thought was scratchiness was air.
I couldn't walk. My leg had swollen up so much that there was no way I couldn't even walk out the bed. My grandmother had to come from Brooklyn and help me dress in the morning because I couldn't do it. And that hurt my heart. My grandmother had to help me. I was supposed to help my grandmother, and sorry. So.
I remember I got a call one day, just a call, but that call led me to get bronchitis and pneumonia.
I mentioned that I saw a rheumatologist who evaluated me and looked at my skin and my eyes and blood work, and came to the conclusion based on a number of things that he saw that I have an autoimmune illness going on. They thought it was lupus. It's not. Symptomatically, it is. In addition to that, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, which is a condition in women only, where there's scar tissue, and it's actually uterine tissue, and it accumulates outside of the uterus in other areas of the pelvic region, maybe on the intestines, on the ovaries. Every once in a while you hear of it going to the lungs. For some women it's a quick fix. They get surgery, they take pills, hormone pills, and they're fine. And for some women it's an ongoing battle. I mean, if you think about it, it causes internal bleeding and pain, and it's agonizing. And there's a big debate about whether or not this is an autoimmune illness in and of itself, or if it's a symptom of immune dysfunction or an autoimmune process. So I think it's worth it to mention that that is part of my sort of overall list of things that I have going on.
I get immunogammaglobulin, intravenous immunogammaglobulin. It's a blood product. It's immune cells. It's the immune cells of many, many, many different, the blood of many different people. And it takes a lot of blood to make a small amount, so it's very expensive. It's controversial, but it's becoming more and more evident that it works. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for everybody. It only works for a certain kind of MS patient.
They had two options. They could do a thyroidectomy, but they were concerned that it might hit the parathyroid. And because I still was using my voice a lot, both semi-professionally and to holler at the kids, they didn't think that was a good idea. It was too much of a risk. So they asked if I would be willing to take what they called a hot drink, radiated iodine. And I agreed.
My doctor has to write all this paperwork every 3 months to get my treatment, which is working, continued.
They are saying that I may need a lung transplant right now, which is really difficult. They spoke to a few hospitals, but no one wants to deal with a patient that has scleroderma because they feel if they transplant, if they give me another lung, that it's just going to start attacking that lung as well. And the outcome is just, it's not good with people with scleroderma, or it's a very high risk of death. So either way, when they see it on paper, a patient has scleroderma, they just push it aside. They don't want to deal with me. So I'm on a very, very long waiting list. That's why they started me on the chemotherapy. There's nothing they can do to take away the scars on my lungs. They just have to keep it stable, that's the best they can do.
8 years ago, I was diagnosed without any advance warning at all with endometrial cancer, uterine cancer. And again, when they had to go through the family history, my history, and Graves popped up, and also the excessive weight popped up, there was again a kind of a link that was made.
I can't sleep. Very uncomfortable with the pain. I can't sleep. And sometimes I'm afraid to close my eyes, because I don't think I'm going to open them tomorrow, you know?
Nobody knows what the future prognosis of an MS patient is. It's absolutely impossible to ever be sure. My prognosis is that for the rest of my life, I will never know what's going to happen next, and that's MS.
When it started getting bad in college, when I was tired all the time and was experiencing the chronic fatigue, I thought I was just stressed out. And I was still getting rashes. I thought the rashes were due to stress. Because, I'm a college student. It was going into my senior year. I was working on a literary magazine, working for a newspaper, taking on 18 credits. So I'm like, I'm just stressed out. Once I graduate, everything will be fine. Because I kept going to doctors thinking something was wrong, and they run tests and they told me you're perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. So I figured once I graduate, everything will be fine. But it didn't go away.
They would tell me, you're just under a lot of stress. Or it's in your head. And it made me angry because I said, in my head, I have a fever. I can't make myself get a fever. Where is it coming from?
We had reached the point where I thought, well, maybe this is all it can't be totally psychosomatic, but maybe what I need is psychiatry. And I was all prepared to do that.
When a woman develops sort of a systemic litany of symptoms, there's this sort of rush to assume that it's psychosomatic, it's just stress, or maybe she needs to get married, or maybe she needs to get divorced. Everybody sort of plays into that. And so I kind of always fight that urge, and I always say to women, if you have a friend who's not feeling well, don't just tell her that it's in her head, because then you're just allowing that cycle of blame to continue.
Like in the back of my mind, I knew there was something wrong, but it bothered me. I cried because the doctors were telling me that I was healthy. So I really thought I was going insane.
I woke up and my hand was numb. Actually, both hands were kind of numb, but one of them, my right hand, was particularly numb because I was a musician, because I, liked to work computers, because I was a guitar player and a voice teacher that played scales all day. Immediately, I was diagnosed carpal tunnel. It was the trendy diagnosis at the time. Everyone was getting it. Why would I be spared that disease? So they did 2 major surgeries on my arm to correct what they determined was nerve damage.
I took myself to the first of 13 doctors. Not because I selected to Dr. Hop or Dr. Shop, but each one of them, when they had tried whatever they were going to try and discovered it didn't work and they couldn't figure out why my eyes both eyes by then, seemed to be tearing, seemed to be scratchy, and the right eye particularly seemed to be swollen. So they would send me to the next one.
And there's a lot of talk about rewarding physicians for outcomes, but there really isn't any discussion about rewarding physicians for quality time spent with patients. And when you've got a systemic, complicated illness that isn't just like you have an itch. I mean, you've got multiple things going on. 5-10 minutes is not going to cut it. It's just not going to work. And luckily for me, whatever I have doesn't seem imminently life-threatening, but that wasn't the case for a lot of women that I spoke to who are now gone.
I remember one time I went to a doctor and I described all my symptoms, He patted me on the leg and said, "Oh, it sounds like you're in love."
Oh, and here's a good one. They ask if you're married. Are you married? Yes, I'm married. Well, are you having marital problems? What does that got to do with anything?
You don't know how many times they told me that you look fine. You look healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. You're too young to have these symptoms. There's nothing wrong. They kept telling me I just need to relax. Maybe I should take some time off school, some time off work, get some rest, and I'll be fine. And with them telling me that my blood work was normal, I had to believe them, because they're the doctors. I figured they knew what they were talking about.
About 10 months into this process, I wound up in Brooklyn at Downstate Medical Center. I forget who had recommended, which doctor had recommended that I go. And at that time, I guess I was in my mid-30s. By then, both of my cousins, also in their mid-30s, had died. And he was taking my history, looking at me, and I said, "Do you think possibly it can't be just nerves? It can't be just imagination?" And I said, "Could this be that I'm going into menopause?" I was looking for any reason that I felt increasingly poorly. And I remember him saying to me, "Oh, are you afraid of getting old?" And started to write something down. And I said, "No, I think I'm afraid of not getting old. And I would like to know what this is."
I feel like they were not taking me serious. They were not taking me serious because I'm a female, or because I'm Hispanic, or because, I'm not high class. You're in the middle. And that really hurt. That hurt me a lot. For me to tell somebody this is what I'm feeling and they tell me it's in my head. No, it's not in my head.
Deborah Winborn, her mother. The first place to start is not knowing, what she had. That was really frustrating. And then the doctors, they were frustrating also.
We were sent to somebody who was at that time, considered the creme de la creme. He was touted to be the brightest, the smartest, the best, and the most expensive eye man in the East Coast, certainly New York City and vicinity. Park Avenue address. Skip came with me, and you went into little beautiful velvet chaired cubicles from one nurse to another. And eventually, he actually examined me, and he took all of the reports from the previous doctors. He spread them out, and he quickly read through them, and then he said, "I see you've tried antibiotics, Mrs. Unger." And then I said, "I think so." He said, "I think you have tried antihistamines." I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Well, why don't you try benign neglect?"
Her fingers started swelling up. She couldn't open the door. She was cold.
Even though it's in the hospital, that really upset me because I'm in the hospital and I couldn't get to certain parts of the hospital because I couldn't open the door. So I had to wait till someone come by and
She
help
was
me
getting
in.
a claw thing. Arthritis was so bad, and they were taking tests and telling her actually she didn't have arthritis.
Even though years before I had had a malignancy on the bottom of my foot when Michael, my younger son, was born, and had to deal very young, at the age of 26, 27, with the idea that I had cancer, the big C. That hadn't fazed me. A year on crutches didn't faze me. But these physicians were not aware of that. They didn't know me. And when I said, "I don't look the same," and they knew that I'd been a performer, I suppose it was very easy for them to dismiss it and say, her face has changed, she's getting thinner, or she's getting eventually fatter. It must be pride.
Women can go through a lot more than men. We give birth, for Christ's sake. So when we go in there, we're a little bit stronger. So if you come in there and you're strong and you having a heart attack And the man is laying there. He's had a heart attack, but he's crying and moaning and groaning. Okay. And to men. But a woman is stronger, okay? And the doctors, they come in there and they look at her laying there, and I was like, well, why is she laying in this bed, taking up this bed space?
If I could say one word to doctors so that they would be able to work with their patients who are dealing with things like this, I would say listen. That would be my one word. I would say listen. Listen to your patients. Partner with your patients. Don't be freaked out if your patients actually have, learned about what's going on with them and actually know how to read a lab report. That's good. Someone who has a chronic illness needs to have more information about what's going on in their body. They have to be their own advocate, and they have to be comfortable being their own advocate, because at the end of the day, really, no one's going to know what's going on in that person's body better than the person who's dealing with living with this type of a syndrome. So I think that doctors need to be accustomed to really listening to what their patients think is going on and chasing that down.
I did a post-Labor Day, what was an annual get-together, dinner for 12 or 14 of our friends. Among the friends who was there was a very dear friend who happened to be, of all things, a proctological surgeon, who also is a heck of a good diagnostician.
I got to the point that I have told doctors, I stopped them in their tracks and I told them, you know what? I see I'm wasting my time and yours. I think I better leave. And I'll get up and go.
So she had lupus.
Lupus, AIDS, sarcoidosis,
Tuberculosis.
They put me in a room alone, isolated room, because I was coughing.
And told me I had to wear a mask to see my own child. If I was with her and she coughed for 6 months, then why wouldn't I have tuberculosis too? If she had tuberculosis, I didn't have tuberculosis.
So the doctors were afraid to come near me because they couldn't understand why I was coughing. If they would have gave me an x-ray, like I asked for, instead of telling me all I needed was cough medicine, then maybe they would have known sooner what was going on.
He said, have you seen a doctor? And at that point, I started to cry. I think all of the frustration came out in that one question. Had I seen a doctor, as though somehow or other it were my fault if I had not. And I said, well, if you're giving me a diagnosis, you're number 14. Except I haven't had a diagnosis.
I do think that the person who's going to figure out how to treat what's wrong with me is going to be me. Nobody else is invested in figuring this out as much as I am. My doctors are happy enough just saying, yeah, we acknowledge there's something wrong. We're just going to call you undifferentiated connective tissue disease, or maybe we'll call you chronic fatigue syndrome, to sort of placate the insurance companies who know what that means, and that's good, and we'll treat it like that. But that's not good enough for me.
It just so happened that while I was in the hospital the first time with that paralysis, they did a spinal tap. The results of that test came through after I was released. The results of that test showed that I had oligoclonal banding in my spinal fluid, which indicates MS. But no one qualified read that lab report. The knowledge was evident at that time, but that report went into a file and was not found for 10 years.
So he said, well, I think I know what you have. And I braced myself to find out what it was I had. And he said, I think you have something called Graves' disease, which in itself sounded fairly grave, but I wasn't sure of what that really meant. And I said, well, how grave is it?
I'll say 7 to 10 years. Oh yeah, 7 to 10 years. I've been from one doctor to the other, and the other. And I mean, I look for specialists. There's so many things for them to tell me now. All this time, I've had it, and now they're telling me now? Because I had to get angry?
I emphatically believe that in our current medical system, we get lab results and there are these reference ranges, and physicians look at the reference range and they say, well, you're perfectly fine. Maybe you're a little bit low in iron, or maybe you're a little bit high in this. You're perfectly fine. And I think there's a big problem with that when you have a chronic condition. There may be reference ranges, but you have to look at what's normal for the patient. Maybe someone can have a thyroid function test that's within that reference range, but is that within the patient's normal reference range? We don't look at that, and I think as a result of that, it's really difficult for people to get a diagnosis. I think I've been a victim of that. I think even the women I interviewed for this documentary, many of whom had diseases that should have been easy enough to diagnose. But nobody was looking at the bigger picture like that. They just did some very general tests and everything was in the reference range. So they didn't take that additional step and do the testing that would have demonstrated that they had one of, lupus or scleroderma in the case of Demi, who I interviewed.
If they had done something about it earlier, it wouldn't be as bad. So she got to the point where she's at the last stage of her illness. So if they had done something earlier about it, it wouldn't be at this point. There's no cure for it, but it wouldn't be as bad.
We have a very big problem with the ignorance of the medical profession about autoimmune disorders. We have a very big problem with the fact that all these symptoms do not fall within the jurisdiction of any one particular specialist.
It has gotten to the point where it is so overly specialized that it's very difficult to get a true diagnosis.
The ignorance doesn't work as it is, but the managed care thing makes it worse.
So, started this project 10 years ago. I'm starting a new chapter in less than 2 weeks. I'm going for a second master's, this time in public administration. I'm going to see how far I can get in getting some legislation that I think would be really useful for people like me. But I need to get this project done. I can't move on to the next chapter until I've closed that chapter, or at least gotten it to a point where I can see the end in sight. So I'm taking a week off of work, and instead of going and sitting on a beach, I'm taking myself up to Maine to sit on a deck overlooking some water where I will edit as much as I can possibly edit in 5 days.
It first started to change, I guess. My sense of self changed when my behavior changed. I think that bothered me more than anything.
I don't like to have a mirror, long mirror. I don't like it. I just got the mirrors that I could see from here up. Because when I see myself, the way the arthritis have turned my joints in, disfigured my legs. That's why I don't have that long mirror.
When I first started taking steroids, I put on 30 pounds within the first month. So, sometimes it's difficult because not only with the weight gain, but emotionally, just telling yourself you have to get up every morning and take pills, and it's something you have to take for the rest of your life.
Like, why couldn't I have the death thing? Why couldn't I die? Why do I have to be like an invalid? And see, this is how I remember how people think of disabilities, because I used to think that way. I was one of those people. Ugh, disabled.
When I first became really, really ill, I was so sick to my stomach. I lost so much weight. I was like 90-something pounds, if even that. And then I gained weight. It seems that my metabolism fluctuates a lot. It's changed my skin. I break out in rashes all the time. I have a lot of scarring. And typically, I can't even wear contact lenses because my eyes are so incredibly dry from my immune system just kind of eating up my eyes.
I stopped having my picture taken, except when I had to, when I was giving a speech or appearing someplace.
I went to the doctor. He patted me in the head and said, "Oh, don't worry. Soon you'll be pretty again." Like, okay. Because at the time, since I started medication, I had a little acne on my cheek and my face was a little puffy. But I didn't think I was so grotesque that I needed that kind of statement. I really didn't need to hear that at the time because I was upset that, I had a little acne and, I was a little rounder than I started with.
I try to keep myself busy. What I do is, when I go to the hospital, I find that if whenever I find out that someone is admitted and I know them, or even if I don't, but they're in the group with the lupus and stuff like that, I go to them. I speak to them. Because you know what it is when you have lupus? Most of the women that I know with the lupus feel so ugly. Feel so ugly and useless. So I like to give them a little lift. I'll talk to them, I'll put on their makeup, make them feel better about themselves.
I've kidded about the fact that before I was married, a very dear artist friend of ours on the West Coast had given me and Skip as a wedding gift portrait that he had done of me. I would look at that and I didn't want it to be hung. And I would kid about the fact that the reason was that it was like the picture of Dorian Gray. With Dorian Gray, he stayed young and the picture got horrendous, hideous. With me, I felt the picture stayed the same. I felt horrendous, if not hideous.
I said to somebody, my God, I'm a woman. I mean, I'm not a kid anymore, and I have frizzy hair and glasses and bad skin. I should be out of my awkward period, but I'm still in the middle of it, and I hate how that makes me feel. I really do. And I don't think we can underestimate how not having control over your body and your appearance is extremely difficult for women, and yet it's women that have these problems more than men.
All of the things that resulted tangentially as an outgrowth of the Graves, whether or not they can actually trace it, the cancer, the second cancer, back to that or not, I don't know. I'm sure that there would be doctors on one side or another of the issue. But the fact that it has made it more, I've broken my foot, which I most probably wouldn't have if I didn't have the excess weight. I've had blood clots and form of phlebitis, all of which are the weight related. And it is the weight more than anything that has impacted so much else in my health. And that is something which they can't seem to resolve. I can't resolve it, and the doctors can't resolve it and help. They'll just say, it would be better for you if you didn't have to deal with this.
Delivery man comes, UPS, I know the guy, I'm like, hey, what's up? Like that, I'm like, yo, what's up? Because I'm very, very happy all the time. I go, oh, what's up? He goes, how you doing, Reyes? Sign here. I go, I ain't order anything, and I know that's not no damn Avon. He goes, sign here, please. I don't know what it is, but he had that look, and I'm like, what the? I didn't order this. It was diapers. It was diapers for adults, and I had company here, so I put them there. I told him just put them there, and I'm like trying to hide the, what it says, and I'm like.
When I'm walking down the stairs and it's rush hour, and there's like people behind me, and I'm holding on to the rail because I have a hard time going downstairs. And no problem going up, but going downstairs. And I remember how, and this happens every single time during rush hour, I remember how when people would go slow on the stairs, I used to think, especially when I had PMS, I go, get out of my way, right? And it's like, I would curse at these people, right? And, it's just thinking that they were doing it against me. And I always think of myself thinking that way, and I reflect that thought from the person behind me. And it makes me feel like really horrible. That's why I can't deal with rush hour, because I can't deal with the way it makes me feel about myself.
Since I became so heavy, I've traveled to all 50 states at least once. I have appeared before congressional committees and legislatures in various states. I've done television, I've done radio, done interviews. I have no problem doing that, but that's because people looking at me believe that's who I am, for good or for bad. What I have difficulty dealing with is going back. As I said, not that sense of you can't go back again. You can't go home again, because there, the difference between what I was or what I appeared to be, because your body is not what you are. I know that. I'm not that vain or stupid. But so much is dependent upon how you appeared in the memory of those who had known you before. And I looked nothing like what I had been.
I was completely depressed. I felt very alone. I couldn't understand how I had been so stupid to believe that could have possibly be any absolute being that could be so cruel as that. I mean, if there was an absolute being, I didn't want to know.
To think that you have an illness that will never be cured, or they don't have a cure for, it was too much for me to deal with at the time.
I did not want to see people who, outside of the family, were very close friends. I really was not happy seeing people who had known me, because I didn't know me anymore.
So it's day one in Maine. I've been here for about 4 hours, and I have not been able to bring myself to do any work yet on this documentary. I think that people are going to wonder why I'm talking to myself on a balcony. I think that 10 years of effort is just overwhelming, and I just kind of don't know where to begin. And this was my biggest fear coming up here, was that I would bring myself here, try to force myself to work on this, and just not find the courage to delve in. So yeah, it's just too much. It's just too much.
The project was interrupted. I wasn't able to complete it as I originally intended and when I intended, because just trying to juggle feeling miserable and having a job was just kind of more than I could handle.
When I first was diagnosed, I was working at an interior design company. I thought it was going to be the best time of my life. I just graduated. I was going to get the perfect job. I was going to start helping my mom out, get my own place. And it's like everything crumbled at that point, because I was not supposed to get ill. That wasn't in the plan.
I found a job in sales, which works for me because I seem to know how to sell things, but also because, I don't clock in and clock out. I go, I do my thing, nobody's checking. As long as I'm selling, I'm okay. And what I realized is over this time, the documentary had to be about that. It had to be about how do you live, how do you support yourself, how do you have a job? How do I get it? If I want a new job, how do I do that when I have to, go somewhere where I show up from 9 to 5? That's what the documentary has become about, not just raising awareness about autoimmune, but raising awareness about how difficult it is to live with something that's chronic, and in particular is autoimmune.
I couldn't continue my work because I was so sick and so tired and so, oh my God, down, It was horrible. And I stayed with the Avon, but it got to a point that I couldn't even do the Avon. The body wouldn't let me function.
I'm gonna have days where I'm not gonna be able to work, good days and bad days. So I didn't want to do it to an employer, go to a job and then have to take days off to go to the hospital, go and visit my doctors, not knowing when I have a good or bad day.
Well, I'm my own boss, and I have my own company, and I teach singing. And I make my own hours. And if I had to show up for work, not feeling well, it would be absolutely impossible. It'd be absolutely impossible. There would be no way that I could show up for work.
This is when I was interning at MTV, one of the best times of my life. Before anything really happened, before I experienced too much pain or anything. I can't let go of this.
When I first started to develop the worst of my symptoms, I was in graduate school to get a Master's of Art in Media, and I wanted to do quirky sort of mockumentaries and video editing and music videos. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. And then all these symptoms began to really hit me in a very profound way. And I tried having part-time jobs even. I just couldn't do it. I kept losing my jobs because I was too sick. I couldn't show up, or I had to leave early, or, I have a lot of often like morning sickness, and so maybe I could show up, but if I would get there and I would just be in and out of like the office all morning long, dealing with feeling just nauseous. And I just think that we need a culture where it's okay to come out and say, hey, I've got this chronic condition, can you work with me? Especially now with telecommuting. I don't think people need to be physically in an office from 9 to 5. But that's the environment that we have, that's the expectation. And it's not realistic, it's not feasible for a lot of people. But I'm hoping that this will help to change that.
There was a doctor that she went to, and he said, well, why is she still trying to go to work? She shouldn't be working. So he told her to go to this doctor that was over there on
He mentioned it one time. I didn't know he was actually going to apply for me. Then I got a letter. The letter basically said I'm in the hospital so much that I should be on disability. Next thing I know, they told me that there was an application put in for me, and within a year, I was on disability.
I think we have a problem also with our disability assistance policies, if you will. I mean, I think that you've got people who work in the Social Security offices, and if you're a contractor and you've broken an arm, then it's a no-brainer to get disability. But if you're somebody who has a chronic illness that they can't see or doesn't fit within their sort of like codes of what qualifies as a disability, and if you have some work experience or an education, believe it or not, that factors into it. And they think, well, I mean, I know when I went, unfortunately, through that system, it took me 3 years to get before a judge. And during that time, I kept getting letters back that said, you're young enough and experienced and educated enough to train yourself to do something less challenging. And I don't know what that means. I don't know, what does education, what does age have to do with being chronically ill? Nothing.
I was very fortunate because at the time, I couldn't do anything, so I was still staying with my mom. I don't know what I would have done that year because I couldn't go to work. I didn't have disability, so if I had to worry about paying rent and paying for medication, I don't know what I would have done.
Even someone like Demi, who appeared in this documentary, finally, she did get on disability because what she had was terminal by the time they diagnosed her. But it took her a year, even with a doctor applying on her behalf, to get that disability assistance.
I have Medicare and Medicaid, so that pays for a lot of my expenses. I know I'm one of the few, lucky few, that has that, because I know it can be rough, because every week I have to get my prescriptions filled, and like every other week I'm at the hospital, and there's lab fees, because I always have tests done, and blood work, and x-rays. So I can imagine other people, this can be very expensive if they don't have proper insurance.
I had no medical insurance when I had those hand surgeries. And those surgeries cost $20,000. It took me so long to pay that off. In fact, I couldn't even pay it off. Basically, I had to make a deal with the hospital, like a collection agency that the hospital had. They said, okay, pay us half and we'll leave you alone.
Doctors pay cash, medicine pay cash. Some doctors, they just send you a bill, but the medicine you need it right then and there. So you have to pay for it. There's nothing else you can do but pay for it.
Luckily, I got medical insurance before I was diagnosed with MS. And I pay a lot for it. But it doesn't cost as much as the treatment for MS does.
I had 3 credit cards at that time, and it maxed all of them out because of medicine.
I lost my, health insurance because I kept losing work. And I would try to get new work, but I couldn't keep it. So I kept losing my health insurance. So I actually enrolled in the university health plan. And because I couldn't work, I took out student loans. That was my source of income. Student loans. And I lived off of that. And I actually ended up staying in school for a lot longer than I should have. Because if I had not been in school, I would have lost access to student loans, which were paying my rent, and I would have lost access to health benefits.
My husband has medical insurance through his company. And I've heard stories about people actually losing their jobs when a dependent has a chronic illness. And I am trying to get up the courage to find out whether, I know that my husband wouldn't get fired, but I wouldn't want to put him in jeopardy in any way. But you see, my treatment costs $7,000 a month. So if an employee marries somebody who has like a load of $7,000 a month, do they want to get rid of the employee? And so here I am paying a lot of money for my individual insurance to protect, my husband's reputation.
So, I haven't finished the documentary yet, still working on it. But I thought it might be worth it to, talk about why I've been sitting in bed, like, all day. So, after years of dealing with this, and racking up enormous amounts of debt that I'm actually paying off, because I guess I'm one of the only people out there who's stupid enough to try to pay off her debts, and being told by disability caseworkers that I'm too educated or something to qualify, and just at every form of government where I've tried to get help, being told that it's outside their jurisdiction. Somebody made a recommendation that I called the EEOC to find out what protections I might have under the law in terms of asking for workplace accommodations, because I'm at the point where I can't continue to walk around all day long carrying stuff in the rain and the snow. I can't do it. It's just, the pain has gotten so bad that I can't even walk down the block. And I have a job that requires me to walk all day long carrying 30, 40 pounds of stuff. It's just not possible for me to continue. So I heard that there are people who are getting assignments where they can work from home because they have a kid or something, and I have been wanting to ask for the same type of accommodations for me, but I'm terrified because I tried calling the Human Resources Department just to kind of feel it out a while ago, and they kind of just started to accuse me, what are you saying? I just felt really threatened by them, so I haven't followed up on that, and I want to talk to my boss about it to see if there's anything they can do for me, or see if there's another position within the company. I would apply for another job that would be more accommodating, but I don't know how to apply for a job where I'm going in asking off the bat for accommodations. I don't know how to do that. So before I approached my current boss, I thought maybe I should talk to someone to find out whether or not I'd be protected by the ADA. Probably not, I suspect, because nobody really has even been able to give me a clear diagnosis. So aside from the fact that people with invisible disabilities typically don't have protections under ADA law, take it to another level of invisibility where I don't even have a diagnosis that I can use to explain to people how I feel. So anyway, I called the EEOC. It was on hold for 20 minutes. Lovely. And finally a woman picked up, and she right away said, "Hello, I'm going to ask you for some demographics. What's your name? Where do you live? What's your address? What's your race? Are you black, white?" I mean, I kind of answered all the questions, but didn't understand why she wasn't asking me maybe why I was calling. And so she continued to ask me all these demographic, personal questions. I mean, I think she was about to ask me for my social security number. I don't know what was going on with that. And I tried to interrupt her, and I said, "Well, can I tell you why I'm calling?" And she said, "Are you filing discrimination? Do you have a case against your employer?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't think I have a case. I'm just trying to find out what my rights are under the law." And I didn't even get to tell her any more than that. I tried to explain how I went through the disability process, was denied, and ended up with, this 6-figure debt, and took a job that sort of works for me, but sort of doesn't, and now more doesn't than does, I guess. I was trying to frame the discussion just a little bit, and she just cut me off and said, "This is out of our jurisdiction. I can't help you. Call somebody else." And I kind of said, well, I mean, if the EEOC doesn't enforce ADA law, then who does? Who do I talk to about this? Who do I call? I mean, I've tried to go the disability route. That didn't work. I've tried to deal with my assemblyman. That didn't work. I don't know where to go at this point. And she just said, well, call the ADA, which was completely confusing to me because the ADA, as far as I understand it, is a law. It's not a person or an organization. So I even said to her, "Well, do you have a phone number of someone I can call?" She said, "No. But this is not within our jurisdiction. You have to figure it out." And I said, "Well, I just want to know if I approached my manager about this, would I be at risk of losing my job?" And she said, "Andrea," now we're on a first name basis, this woman and I. She said, "Andrea, you can be fired at any time for any reason, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, if you're fired and you think it's discrimination, then you can file a case. But until that point, we have nothing to say to you." And that was it. And then she said, "Andrea, I'm sorry I wasn't able to help you." But she wasn't sorry. Oh, and I forgot to mention that at some point, she said to me, because, she asked how old I was, of course, and I told her and made a joke about getting old. And she said, "Well, a lot of people didn't wake up today, so you're doing just fine." And I said, "Yeah, well, you haven't heard my story yet, because I don't really feel like I'm doing just fine." And the thing is that more often than not lately, I don't want to get up. I don't want to be one of those people that wakes up because I can't deal with it anymore.
Wait for the bomb to drop. Listen as it burns out all the shadows you see. Hold out no hope for seeing the past from the top. Watch as you become all the things you never wanted to be. Hold out no hope for seeing the past from the top. Watch as you become all the things you never wanted to be. Hold out no hope for seeing the past from the top.
So it's day 2 in Maine, and the good news is that I've been working on this project. The bad news is that I haven't gotten very far. I just don't know how to pull this all together, 10 years of material or experiences. And I've had to contend with a mosquito infestation, which means I had to start taking prednisone the first night or I would have been in trouble. So that was kind of a bummer. Also, people are kind of treating me like I'm a freak because, they're all here celebrating leisure time and I'm working like a maniac on my deck overlooking water, which is kind of precisely what I wanted to do, but apparently that seems a bit odd to a lot of people. So anyway, it's almost about 9 o'clock tonight. I have been pretty much working consistently since I completed breakfast, which is very good, by the way. And I expect that I'll be working a little bit more throughout the night, so hopefully, before I leave here, I'll have something to take home. But so far, it's not going quite the way that I had hoped.
It affected my relationships because I was just wanting to know why.
My boyfriend I was with at that time, before, when the doctor was telling me there was nothing wrong, and I kept telling him I didn't feel well, something's wrong, he would tell me, it sounds like you just want to be sick. You just want attention.
They were making fun of me one day they were making jokes, and it was like, don't let mommy get a scratch. She'll be like, ah, an infection. I'm like, I'm not like that. Yes, you are, Ma.
Well, autoimmune diseases are chronic, which means that they can affect somebody permanently. They have daily symptoms. It's difficult because people often can't see autoimmune diseases, and so for the women who are suffering, it's very difficult to get emotional support as well as medical and financial support. And I refer to autoimmune diseases as invisible disabilities because even though people can't see them and usually haven't heard of them, they really can destroy a person's life physically, financially, socially, really on all levels.
It just puts a whole stigma on every relationship. But you get better at it. I got better at it.
I find it easier to deal with things if somebody will be forthright and say, this is what you have, these are your options, this is what you're going to have to deal with, and this is the way you're going to have to approach it. That doesn't terrify me. That doesn't really faze me as much as it is to have to divulge or explain myself when I'm dealing with something which is chronic. I get impatient in the same way that people who have to live with me or interact with me get impatient. I get impatient. It bothers me even so after all this time.
They look at you with this pity face. That way. I don't like that. So I'd rather not tell anybody because I don't need that and I don't want it. I want you to like me for what I am and who I am.
People that are very close to me know that I have MS. Nobody else needs to know. I used to need everybody to know because I thought that I needed help, but it turns out that they don't help me very much. The people that are ignorant, they actually make it worse.
And I tell them, you know what? Looks can be deceiving. Very deceiving, because I may look good to you, but I don't feel like that. It's not how I feel inside,
People expect you to get over it. And the fact that you don't is not so much insulting to them, but it's difficult because they then can't put it behind them if they're going to deal with you.
It affects my relationships because I can't explain to people what I have. And what I found doing this documentary is that even the women who had, a specific diagnosis of lupus or or Graves' disease or MS, that they still had a difficult time explaining to people that this wasn't something that, that they were going to recover from.
People don't want to be near people that are sick. It's just negative, and they feel like they might be inept, or they might not be able to handle it, or they might not be able to do something, fix it, whatever, and so they just would rather just turn it away.
Living with somebody who has a chronic problem that is not so debilitating that they can't function at all is very difficult for people who are not subject to the same problem. Sympathy can last just so long, and it's hard to empathize if you've never experienced it.
Oh, this is Manny. This is my boyfriend of almost 2 years. And best friend for, how long have we been friends?
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Like 12 years.
My full name is Harry Fireman Unger Jr. Fireman because the immigration officer at Ellis Island couldn't spell Furman, and it came out fireman. When I was a little boy, I thought I could go the wrong way on a one-way street because I was a fireman.
His name is Skip.
I got nicknamed Skip because my uncle thought I looked like Skippy in the funny papers, in the comics.
She pretty much laid everything out. Made me read a book. Luckily there was a book on it. Other than that, if you're friends, that's a foundational relationship. You should just be there for each other, and everything will work itself out.
He will come and he'll bring me breakfast and he'll fix my lunch and he'll fix my dinner and he'll bathe me. And there are so many that don't have that. I consider that I'm very lucky there in that department,
Well, she's always been very strong about her disease. She reads up on it, and she knows more than most of the doctors we go to see about it. So, I try to be sensitive too. That's the best I can do. She has a good handle on, even during the tough times, keeping a stiff upper lip. So it's not that hard for me. It's more hard for her.
Juan and I have been married for over 51 years, and she's been the most wonderful person in my life, and I love her more and more each day.
That's good.
When we got together, she was healthy, and she told me she had been in the hospital now, but we've been friends for so long. It wasn't like I'd be like, oh no, you're sick, I gotta go, and then it wouldn't work out. It was worth it, so took the chance.
We'd go to the doctors together. I assured her that eventually it would straighten itself out, and that we would be able to live together through it, and continue our life as it had been, maybe with some necessary physical changes, but we would go on, and it had nothing. I loved her as much as I always did, and I wanted to be with her as much as I always wanted to, and we were always a team. We did a lot together, and that was going to continue, and it did.
So it's day 3 in Maine. I have edited about 5 sequences so far. I'm not entirely sure that I'm happy with any of them. And I'm feeling a little bit stressed out right now because as soon as I go back, which is just in a couple of days, classes start for me and my whole new life begins. And if I do not get this project completed, it is going to kill me. And I don't think I'll be able to focus on the next round of school and the next sort of set of goals that I make for myself if I have this nagging at me. So just a couple more days. Got the rest of the night to work on this, so hopefully I get something that I can bring.
All of these years, although it's taken me this long to try to complete this project, it has never left my mind. From the minute I get up until the minute I go to bed, it has haunted me that I haven't completed this. And knowing that I had this out here and I wanted to create this discourse, this record of some of the things that I've been through, some of the things the women I've interviewed have been through, and what women, I'm sure, largely have gone through, women who don't yet have a voice. Knowing that I had this in progress and that it was not yet done has kept me moving all this time.
Family. My family. I want to be there for my family. That makes me want to go on.
I never love someone the way that I love you.
Oh, that was nice! Woo!
I have my husband, who's great, and I have my baby, who makes me so happy. It gives me a reason to just keep going.
I know this hurts my mother, and I have to be strong for her. You know, she told me once I was in the hospital not to be depressed, then let her be the one to be depressed and cry.
I make every day really special. Just in case tomorrow I don't make it, they'll remember that yesterday was a nice day.
Skip's goodwill and good cheer was, I think, basically instrumental in keeping me on an even keel. Because it would have been very easy to have lapsed into either hysteria, involvement, self-pity, self-scrutiny, being overly judgmental about people, things, and me. And it is his innate good nature and ability to find some joy in things that has made it possible for us during the year, and for me during the years, to suddenly pull myself up short and say, "This, you're behaving ridiculously." He may not be right, but he's not all wrong about this.
What? Terrific.
I feel that if I break down, that I'm letting it control me, and I can't let that happen. And also I had to prove to doctors that I will not end up in bed. I wouldn't be bedridden and crippled, and I will see my 27th birthday, because one doctor told me that I wouldn't live to see 26, and I'm now 27.
I know I sing it sharp like a razor blade choir, but baby, that's the only way. Your heart is a harp, but your lips are a liar. I'll pluck the truth from them someday. Can read between crisscrossed lines falling through stars in black skies, looking like clay pigeons to all the shotgun eyes. You never hear the whispers when you're looking for the grail in the stacks of rakes up to your knees. The snow is a drifter and he buries the trail of the tracks that take you back from me. Can read between crisscrossed lines falling through stars in black skies, looking like clay pigeons to all the shotgun eyes. You were just a dream within a dream, a shadow that chased me for too long. So long. cages for your cardboard birds. Gotta make a living either riding to the dead, stuck with only cut up ransom words. Can't read between crisscrossed lines, falling through stars in black skies, looking like clay pigeons to all the shotgun eyes, to all the shotgun eyes, to all the shotgun eyes.
This goes with me everywhere I go. When I drive to work, it's with me. When I walk around the city, it's with me. I have 3 of them. This happens to be my small travel size iPod, but I also have full size iPod, medium size iPod, you name it, I've got it. I should really invest in Apple stock. But this little piece of equipment has gotten me through more than I can explain. I mean, in the moments where I absolutely felt like I was going to break down, I pull away, I listen to music.
It's teaching, and it's teaching small children, you know, teaching music to kids, and teaching people to sing, and writing music, and it's really music.
So it's day 4 in Maine. I was feeling pretty good about where I was with the project, and then realized that I have a lot of footage that I'm missing, things I didn't capture, and obviously I can't go back now and get some of that footage because a lot of the women have since passed away. So it's a little bit frustrating. I'm trying to just take some time to relax, and I'll continue to do as much as I can while I'm here in beautiful Maine.
They need to educate women on this. That has to be done. That has to be done. That's a must.
There needs to be a larger perspective and an amalgamation of a lot of knowledge. And a database has been started for MS, but this database needs to be started for all autoimmune illness.
One of the things is education. Knowledge is a special tool to learn how to cope with this. Because if you don't have the knowledge, you won't know what to do, what's going to happen to you in the long run. Also, I have my friends and my family that's been very supportive to me, and they're always there. And also, I go to a support group. I talk to people who can relate to what I'm talking to, and I started a message board online. I made so many wonderful friends that way.
I guess If you're really lucky, you will have some, whether it's spouse, friend, relative, significant other, someone who, even if they don't understand and can't feel what you're going through, is there for you. I was fortunate in that I had a husband who was. Other than that, I think it has to come from within. Because if you yourself can't come to some sort of closure, I don't think that you can expect that others are going to be able to sustain the kind of support that you are looking for, maybe that you deserve.
I found that when I was interviewing women for this documentary, that was sort of like I was building my own network of support, because even though maybe they've had a specific diagnosis and it took them all much longer to get there than it should have, they had some of the same experiences as I did.
I've learned that life is very precious. I learned that it's very important to have people around you that care for you, are very supportive for you, and I'm learning now how to cope and to stay strong and not let this take over and get the better of me.
And if you don't have nobody to fight for you, you're going to have to fight for yourself.
I think it's important for you to become your own advocate, for you to pursue it, even though people are going to say that you're a hypochondriac. Maybe it's because I am by nature and have been an advocate, and know that it takes a lot of energy and time and persistence and patience and nudging and chutzpah.
Don't feel sorry for yourself because it'll get in the way of you getting the information. Keep moving and maintain your enthusiasm for life, because this will squelch that if you don't make an extra effort.
And I just pray, and prayer is good. So you can see God is good, you know. So that's what I do every day.
Don't allow yourself to feel victimized by this. Don't allow yourself to lay down and cry or whimper over it. I think that you have to, at some point or another, say, what is it that I can do? And forget what it is that you can no longer do.
The most important thing is that doctors need to talk to each other. That is the most important thing.
And there has to be more in the way of going after government to be held more responsible for this.
We have a lot of policies about how to deal with people who need wheelchair access at their jobs or to get onto transportation, and these are great things, but we don't really have policies that help people who just chronically don't feel well.
I hope that after these 10 years, I'll be able to manage another challenge, working, not feeling well, going to school. And I'm hoping that I can come out at the end of this with a film and a degree and a world of experience so that people like me will have more choices. And so that people like me won't be sitting at their dining room table looking at all of their medical records, trying to figure it out for themselves. So that people like me won't be their own primary care physicians. So that people like me won't go into debt for the rest of their lives because they were too sick to work. And so that people like me can have a dream, say this is what I want to do with my life, this is what I want to be, and not be held back by an invisible disability.
So it's my last day in Maine. I've been doing a little bit of sightseeing. Last night at a little after 1 o'clock in the morning, so I guess it's more like this morning, I edited the last major sequence, or last rough cut of a major sequence. So I don't have a rough cut of the whole film, but I do have a rough outline that can help me get that rough cut. So at least I can walk away with that material done. And of course, then I need to add some of the B-roll to complete the profile of all the women that were interviewed, some action shots. I'd like to do some more with music because, you know, music is a big part of me. It's something that I love, and I think it would add a lot to the film. But I'm just really excited that I finally have enough to feel like I've really moved this forward. I am closer to the end. And so it may be that this project does go into its 11th year, but I think I can confidently say that it will not go another 10. And also, as I was walking around Maine and I was, you know, talking to people, and I told them I was here working on a film, and they asked what it was about, and I told them. And I've got to tell you, so many people stopped me and said, you know, I have an autoimmune condition that they can't treat, or that they can't conclusively diagnose, or that they can't control, or that it took forever to diagnose. Or I have a sister who's struggling with an autoimmune condition, and she has some skin issues, and it's changed the way she feels about herself. It's changed her ability to have a job. So I just feel really energized that this project needs to get out there. People are waiting for it, and I have it. So I really hope that the women aren't disappointed that the project, you know, has changed direction a little bit, and that it's taken so much longer to get to the end, you know, than I thought it would. I hope that they're up there feeling good about it, and that they're resting in peace, the ones who have passed away. And maybe now I can actually live in peace. I started a journey originally to understand my body and to understand what was happening to me. And instead, I kind of went on a journey that was unexpected. I met women along the way who helped me see that I'm not alone. And I think that together we can really create not just a better future for women with autoimmune disease, but really for all women.